Look at somebody and tell them, though. Though. Joy takes discipline. Any fool can be miserable. When spiritual retreat leader Jim Curtin uttered these words several decades ago to a young man who was finding it difficult to keep getting up each day and go out into the world and face its various challenges and multiple complications, while simultaneously trying to maintain a spring in his step and the spirit of hoping to be presently surprised by life, Curtin didn't know how that one statement would reorient and reset the daily approach to that young man's life as well as his own spiritual outlook. Hear it again. Joy takes discipline. Any fool can be miserable. Inasmuch as those words were transformative for that young man, for Jim Curtin himself, those words sparked some personal inspiration and became the catalyst for his book, Joy as an Act of Resistance. And the premise, Pastor Thomas, that undergirds the book is simple. Being miserable doesn't take any effort at all. You don't have to pray for misery. You'll never at any time have to prepare for it. When it comes to misery, trouble will hand it to you for free. But when it comes to joy, joy is work. Having joy costs something. And the cost is a decision that you must have the discipline to make every single day so that your faith develops the resilience to recover quickly in rough places. The prophet Habakkuk knew something about the work of joy. In the 7th century BC, what this prophet saw happening in his nation and around the world that was known to him was eerily similar to the sickening and sinister reality that we are witnesses to now in our own time. Habakkuk's nation, Israel, is divided and has been for quite some time. Political power plays have fractured Jerusalem in the north and Judah in the south, and there is no competent or coherent leadership in place to bring both sides together. Only more divisive rhetoric, blame shifting, and public vilification are being spewed from both sides, while the people on both sides are staggering to find support for their everyday needs. And speaking of the people, particularly those in the south in Judah, the political turmoil has provoked covenant disobedience in their spiritual and social practices to the extreme, listen church, that God's people are almost unrecognizable as God's people. Imagine a nation that claims God but looks nothing like the God it claims. Judah's social landscape was infested with violence to the point where it became normalized. There was no longer a sensitivity to or a sacred respect for human life. Those in positions of privilege and wealth and power exploited those already living under the poverty line, multiplying their personal net worth by millions and billions while they were still in office. The governors and the judges had no concern for justice or regard for mercy. They took their marching orders from the king. And if the oppression of others kept them in office, They just call that the price of doing business. The land is sick. God has and God is the cure. But from where Habakkuk was perched, God must be out of the office, because it seems he isn't seeing nothing or saying nothing. God doesn't appear to be too inspired to intervene, and it's this apparent idleness of God that sparks this conversation, this dialogue between God and Habakkuk that we have in front of us. This, beloved, is the uniqueness of Habakkuk amongst the other prophets in Scripture. Prophets typically address the people on behalf of God, but Habakkuk never talks to the people. Habakkuk never talks to the nation. He only talks to God. And what do you say, Reverend Meadows, when after all you've seen, God has remained still and silent? You probably start by asking God what Habakkuk asked him. What did he ask him? He simply asked him this question: Lord, how long? In the first chapter, Habakkuk is in a place of spiritual discontentment because he sees all of the violence, all of the wrongdoing, all of the evil, all of the destruction. And his complaint with God is, how long are you going to let me see all of this play out? I cry out to you for help, and you just let it continue without any kind of reckoning or any kind of response. I'm giving you the Spark Notes version, but you read all of chapter 1 later, particularly verses 1 through 5. Habakkuk tells God, God, if you take a look at the world you created, even you would be astonished at some of the things being done. That some of the things your people are capable of doing, God, you wouldn't believe me if I told you. Are you going to say something? Are you going to do something? What's your plan? What's your end game? What's your strategy? You've been silent. But here's what I'm going to do as he enters into chapter 2, around verse 1. Habakkuk says, I'm going to stand at my watch post. And I'm going to keep looking for you to see if you got anything to say. And beloved, if you wait and watch long enough, God will say something. And when God decides to answer Habakkuk, the plan is made plain. You know the response, don't you? He says to Habakkuk, Habakkuk, write this vision. Make it plain on tablets, so that a runner may go throughout the nation and proclaim it. For the vision is for an appointed time. It speaks to an end, and it does not lie. Though it tarry, Habakkuk, wait for it, because it will surely come and it will not delay. Habakkuk, listen to me, because the proud, the arrogant, and the violent do not have the right spirit in them. They're not going to prevail. But it is the just, it is the righteous who shall live by faith. I don't want to get stuck there this morning, church, but the reassurance from God to Habakkuk is that God always has a vision of victory for himself and for his people that he's piecing together through circumstances. And we can't resign ourselves. What we can't resign ourselves to is allowing the inconvenience of divine timing to deter us from faithful living, because living by faith is what will protect our joy from being snatched away by misery while we're waiting on God. And that's what happens in the remainder of chapter 2. God outlines the plan of how he will use the Babylonians to address the spiritual and social sins of the nation. And although Habakkuk isn't satisfied with the plan, he prays a prayer of thanksgiving for just knowing that God said something, and knowing that God is still God. And then when you get to verses 17 through 19 of chapter 3, he reaffirms his trust in the care of God by declaring, I'm going to use my faith to protect my joy. Y'all looking, but you ain't listening. Though the fig tree does not blossom, and no fruit is on the vines, though the produce of the olive fails, and the fields yield no food, though the flock is cut off from the stalls, yet I will rejoice in the Lord. I will exult in the God of my salvation. This conjunction is significant to everything Habakkuk's faith declares in these verses, because it adds what the Hebrew calls conditional texture. In other words, those are not there randomly. Habakkuk keeps saying though, because this word keeps his language connected to the covenant that he has with God. Habakkuk understands that even when he's uncertain, he still has a human responsibility to his spiritual relationship with God. He has to say though to preserve his joy, because joy is what's going to protect his belief that God's promises are absolutely assured. Here it is. Let me help you shout this way. Though says that the negative in front of me will not be given permission to drain the joy out of me, because the God above me will never stop working for me. I need to say that one more time. When I say though, it means the negative that's in front of me will not be given permission to drain the joy out of me, because the God above me will never stop working for me. And I want you to borrow that from Habakkuk this morning, those of you who are trying to survive and keep believing in 2025. That with all of the violence and nastiness and inhumanity that's becoming so commonplace, along with the personal battles that meet you every morning when you put your feet on the floor, I came to tell you, child of God, you need to keep a though on your tongue and tucked away in your spirit. Because declaring a though reestablishes your trust in God. Oh, that's what Job had to do. You remember what happened with Job after all the loss, the suffering, the sickness, the abandonment, the demonic interference, the false accusations. You know what Job did? Job looked at all of it. He didn't understand what God was doing, and without blinking or without stuttering, he opened up his mouth and he declared, though he slay me, yet will I still trust in him. You gotta have a though in your mouth. Because if we allow the trouble, the unrest, the controversy, the violence to shape our vision for life, our faith will begin to mirror the condition of our circumstances rather than reflect the hope that we have in a God who transcends our circumstances. Beloved, your faith has to look beyond what's falling apart. You got to fix your eyes on the one who is faithful. If you're going to have keep a though in your spirit in spite of what you see, let me suggest first of all that you make spiritual preparations in advance of the probabilities. Make spiritual preparations in advance of the probabilities. That on the heels of God's response and revealed plans for the nation to Habakkuk, the Babylonians will invade Judah. They're going to carry them into exile for 70 years. He begins to envision, Habakkuk does, all of the disastrous and catastrophic probabilities that could become the reality of those left to live in the ruins. You saw it. He references failing fig trees, fruitless vines, none producing olive trees, sterile livestock. All of these agricultural disasters that would all but ensure death and poverty. But what I find intriguing, Pastor Thomas, is that prior to chapter 3, verse 17, there is no reference to anything agricultural being affected by the attack that was coming. And this isn't some interpretive overreach. Habakkuk no doubt knew what could happen to the land when another nation attacked it. But in his though responses, without knowing that it will happen, he anticipated the likelihood of it, and he has prepared himself on the inside for whatever will be. Y'all missed it. It hasn't happened yet. It might not happen at all. But he builds up a faith fortress around his joy, so that when or if the day comes when there are no figs, no fruit, no food, or no flocks, his joy in God won't fail, because he didn't tie his joy to the land. He tied his joy to the Lord. I wish I had a praying church. He said, yet I will rejoice in the Lord. I will exalt in the God of my salvation. And let me say this, and I'm moving. Too many of us anchor our faith to our circumstances.